gonna shiver with fear when I tell you this story. It happened a few summers back when I and my buddies decided to go camping in the old forest. We set up our camp near this clearing we found, thinking it was safe enough. We had our tents, our firewood, and enough snacks to last a fortnight. The sun was setting, painting the sky in fiery reds and oranges, casting long, twisted shadows across the forest floor. As darkness fell, we gathered around the fire, telling stories and laughing. But deep down, I could feel something wasn't right. The air turned chilly, and the woods fell silent like it was holding its breath. Around midnight, when the fire was burning low, we started hearing it soft, almost like a breeze, but with a strange rhythm to it. Whispers. We all exchanged uneasy glances, trying to shrug it off as just the wind playing tricks on us. Then we heard it clear as day. A voice, distant but distinct, saying, "Help me." It sent a chill down my spine that I can't rightly describe. We all shot up, scanning the dark for any sign of who it might be. But there was no one there, just us and the shadows, stretching and contorting in the pale moonlight. Fear gripped us, but we couldn't just leave. What if someone was really in trouble? So, clutching our flashlights, we ventured deeper into the woods, calling out, trying to follow that haunting voice. The deeper we went, the denser the trees became, like they were closing in on us. The whispers grew louder, like a chorus of lost souls. I could feel eyes on me, unseen and unblinking, watching every step I took. Then we stumbled upon it, a dilapidated cabin, half hidden by overgrown vines and moss. It looked like it had been abandoned for centuries, but there was a light flickering inside. We approached cautiously, heartbeats echoing in the silence. Pushing open the creaking door, we stepped into a nightmare. The air was thick with dust and a musty, earthy smell. Shadows danced on the walls, casting eerie shapes that seemed to pulse with malevolent energy. We saw someone standing inside the cabin. It seemed he was unaware of our presence. We looked at each other, unsure of what to say. Then he turned around. He was an old, frightening man who looked incredibly eerie. In one hand, he held a crooked stick. It looked really old and had strange symbols on it. At the top, there was a sharp claw from some kind of animal. It looked pretty scary. Around his neck, he wore a necklace with a strange charm on it. It seemed to have some kind of dark power. It made him look even scarier. Meeting this man in the forest felt really spooky. The air got heavy, like something bad was about to happen. It was as if the trees were holding their breath, waiting to see what he would do next. Suddenly, his gaze fell upon us. He was taken aback, clearly not expecting to see anyone. We could see his surprise and terror written across his face. Some of us asked if there was any help he needed or if he was in some trouble. He stood there in silence, looking at us with expressions mixed with anger. Again, we asked if there was any help he needed, but he didn't respond to us. We left from there without questioning him more because we were too scared to see him. As no one was there in trouble, we returned to our campsite. We were all scared and astonished. We didn't discuss it much and went to bed. However, I was unable to sleep. All I could think about was that man. I could tell my companions were also awake. After a while, I heard noises from the nearby bushes, as if someone was there. I panicked, but ignored it, thinking it might be some animal. Time passed, and I resisted sleep, fearing that if I appeared to be asleep, something terrible might happen. Again, we heard noise from nearby bushes, like something had dropped from someone on the ground, and suddenly, I heard footsteps of someone running from there. I was too scared and quickly ran out of my tent to see who was there. To my surprise, my companions had also come outside. They too had heard the noises. We all gazed in that direction, trying to discern who was lurking, but no one was in sight. We were extremely frightened. We decided not to sleep, and instead to stay outside of our tents. We sat there and resolved to leave this place at first light. But before departing, we would revisit the old man's cabin to investigate what had happened the previous night, or if it was him who was trying to stalk us at midnight. The next morning, we mustered the courage to return to the old man's cabin, but it was empty and no one was inside. It seemed he had vanished without a trace. We made our way back and reported the unsettling encounter to the authorities. They conducted an investigation, but despite their efforts, no concrete leads were found. As time passed, the memory of that eerie forest encounter lingered in our minds. We often wondered about the mysterious old man and the strange energy that surrounded him. It remained an unsolved enigma, a chilling tale we would recount with shivers down our spines. The experience served as a haunting reminder that some mysteries are destined to remain unsolved, lurking in the shadows of our memories. I gotta tell you all about this camping trip I went on with this guy I met online. It was a trip that'll make your skin crawl. So, there's this dude, let's call him Mike. I met him on some forum. He seemed cool enough. We got talking about shared interests, and one day he brought up the idea of going camping together. Now, I ain't one to turn down an adventure, so I said sure. We picked this spot deep in the forest, miles from civilization. It was quiet, too quiet if you ask me. We set up our tents, got a fire going, and started chatting about life. But there was something off about Mike. Couldn't put my finger on it, but he had this way about him, like he was hiding something. Night fell, and that's when things got real strange. I was sitting by the fire, staring into the flames, when I saw Mike off in the distance. He was just standing there, staring back at me. I called out to him, but he didn't move. It was like he was frozen. I got up, walked over, and that's when I noticed it. His eyes, they weren't right. They were dark, like there was no soul behind them. I asked if he was all right, but he didn't answer. He just turned and walked off into the woods. I brushed it off, thinking maybe he was just tired or something. But then I started hearing things. Strange noises, like footsteps and whispers. But when I looked, there was no one there. It felt like the forest itself was watching me. I decided to turn in for the night, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I lay in my tent, staring at the ceiling, trying to ignore the sounds outside. That's when I heard it, a phone ringing. It was coming from Mike's tent. My heart pounded in my chest. I mustered up the courage to unzip my tent and peek inside Mike's tent. But to my surprise, the tent was zipped from the inside. Then, from inside, a voice came.
"Who is there?"
Someone asked from inside. I said,
"I am."
Then someone unzipped the tent, and to my surprise, it was Mike. I was not so familiar with Mike's voice because it was our first meeting, so I could not recognize his voice at first. He asked me what happened, and I was standing there blankly, not knowing what to say. I asked him when he came back to the camp. He said he had been inside the tent for the previous hour and had never come outside. I was surprised and scared at the same time. I said,
"Are you sure?"
He said,
"Yeah, but what happened?"
I said nothing. Then I turned to go back to my tent, but suddenly I remembered something, and I again turned to Mike's tent. He was still staring at me. I said,
"Did you hear any noise from the forest?"
He said,
"No, but is everything okay?"
I said,
"Nothing, just leave it."
I came back to my tent and lay down on my bed. I didn't know what had just happened to me. Was he trying to make fun of me? Or does he have a sleepwalking disorder or something? However, I did not tell him what just happened. I don't know why. Perhaps I felt awkward, or maybe I was scared. Early in the morning, I didn't waste any time. I grabbed my stuff, packed up as quietly as I could, and left that place without informing him. I know it feels rude and is considered bad manners, but I was so scared. I didn't dare look back. I just kept walking until I was far, far away from that dreadful place. Folks, I tell ya, trust your gut. If something feels off, it probably is. That camping trip, it was something out of a nightmare, and I thank my lucky stars I made it out in one piece. Stay safe out there and watch who you trust. You never know what darkness lurks in the hearts of men. I've been camping, hiking, and hunting alone in the forests my whole life because I enjoy being in nature and respect it a lot. I went camping with my wife, daughter, and our dog a few years ago. We found a nice spot to set up camp that wasn't an official campsite, but had everything we needed. On the first night, my daughter wanted to sleep in her own tent, so we let her. We also let our dog, Leo, sleep with her because he can be scary to other dogs and might bark loudly if he gets scared. During that night, my wife and I heard loud footsteps, not like the usual sounds of small animals. I was worried because I had read a story about other people who were killed in a forest while camping. So, I brought guns with me to protect my family. Leo is good at sensing things, so I felt safe with my daughter in her tent. But that night, we only felt uneasy and heard the loud footsteps. The next morning, we went for a walk and found an old road nearby. Leo ran down it, and I followed, worried he might run into other campers. But we didn't find anyone there, just a campsite with everything torn apart. We couldn't understand why someone would leave all their camping stuff behind, especially an expensive tent. We thought maybe they had to leave quickly, and animals destroyed their things. But even the propane tank and cooler were damaged, and it wasn't because of snow. Later that day, something strange happened. Leo started running away from our camp, and I chased after him with a gun. My wife told me she felt like someone was watching her when she was peeing, and that's why Leo ran to her. We searched, but didn't find any signs of who it might be. It was getting late, so we decided to stay another night, all sleeping in the same tent. Before bed, I set up a simple alarm system using a rope and some noisy items to make my wife feel safer. During the night, Leo growled, and I heard a strange noise from the alarm. To make sure we were safe, I fired a shot from my gun to warn anyone who might be watching us. I heard footsteps running away, but I knew it wasn't an animal. Leo was barking loudly, and I told my family that whoever it was had seen that we were armed and had a protective dog, so we were too risky to bother. We stayed safe for the rest of the night and left early the next morning. Later, I saw a documentary about missing people in that area, and it made me realize that we were very lucky to get out safely. Someone had been kidnapped not far from where we camped, and we were thankful that we escaped any harm that weekend.